All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Let's go ahead and get started. My name is Brent Giangregorio. I'm the Director of Client Services here at the Women's Resource Center. And we're thrilled to have you for tonight's workshop, Navigating the Caregiving Journey, Real Stories, Practical Guidance with Sandra Harrison. Before I turn it over to Sandra, I just wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. Because this is a webinar format, all of the lines are automatically muted. But we really do want to hear from you. So there's a box at the bottom of your screen called Q&A. If you click on that box, you can ask your questions or provide feedback in that box. So as we move through the program tonight, please drop any questions or thoughts that you have in there. We've got plenty of time at the end to go through questions or during the program. Again, we'd really, really love to hear from you. This is supposed to be interactive to help you get some guidance and some answers. So please don't hesitate to use that box to ask your questions. This webinar is being recorded, so we will send a replay email out after probably, if not tomorrow, Monday at the latest. So you can watch the recording again. It'll go to everyone that's registered to the webinar. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is as soon as the webinar ends, we have a short survey that will pop up on your screen. We really, really would appreciate your feedback. It helps us improve and learn from these workshops and what you liked, what you disliked, and how we can move forward and deliver the best content and programming possible. So I'd love for you to stay on 1 extra minute after the workshop ends to fill out that survey. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Sandra.
Thanks, Brent. So let me tell you why I'm here. About 5 years ago, my husband decided that he was not going to do any more international traveling with me and our friends because of his health. He was in a declining health situation and decided not to do that. And fortunately, he was very supportive of me continuing on to do so as long as I could. But we agreed that we really didn't want to, have him just stay home alone while I'm gone 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And so we looked for and found a respite care facility, which was actually part of an assisted living facility. And they had a furnished apartment and allowed people to come in for days or weeks, whatever they wanted, and be comfortable, have their meals provided, et cetera. And it worked out really well. We then were transitioning and down in Florida, and we wound up looking for similar kind of help in Florida, which we did find. But 3 years ago, everything changed. We were spending these warm summers in North Carolina, and by the beginning of fall, my husband contracted pneumonia. And so he wound up in the hospital. It was pretty severe and was in the hospital for 19 days. I then had to find medical transport to get him safely back to Florida, where we actually wanted to get him into rehab and not try and do that in this little small town where we were in North Carolina. So we did that. We looked at a couple of rehab facilities, well, online, just knowing nothing about rehab, and found one that would accept him and discovered that some of them will accept you in rehab if you continue to improve, and some actually have a standard that says you have to be able to participate in rehab 3 times a day or a longer amount of time. So we had to sort through that and figure out where he could go, and we did, and that worked out okay. But with his health continuing to decline, he experienced over this period of time about 5 falls where he just slipped and fell. And he was a big man, and I could not get him up myself. So each of these 5 times, I had to call 911, and they were wonderful, of course. He wasn't injured, didn't need to be hospitalized, but we both agreed that this wasn't ideal, that there were other things, other, physical complications in that I didn't feel like I could take the best care of him to continue on that way. We needed some help. So we decided then to look for and find an assisted living facility. And again, I knew nothing about how you assess and uh, decide which is the best facility for you. We'd ask as many questions as we could think of. My husband walked around like the physical facilities, asked a lot of questions about how good the food was, because he was really a foodie. And and so we made a decision. Actually, it was the first decision we made was in a facility that he had done a respite care in. And so we knew a little bit about it. But through trial and error, we discovered that there were differences in even the licenses of assisted living facilities that determined what level of care they could actually provide. And so we were unhappy after a while and changed facilities once, and that was better. But we discovered some other things there and changed a third time. And that was really fortunate that the third facility we found was really a good facility. We had a primary care physician, and Caesar had, that's my husband's name, Caesar. Caesar had four specialist cardiologists, pulmonologists, all the specialist doctors. And it was really hard. I coordinated his doctor's appointments. I coordinated his lab requirements to go and get blood draws and such. I did all of his medications. He had more than a dozen medications, and that required, talking to a doctor when a new one came in, making sure the other doctors knew. And the doctors, of course, never talked to me really, but I get messages through, and it took a lot of my time, which was fine, but I never felt like I was actually doing the best I possibly could. So I was stressed, and there was a nurse practitioner who came into the facility where Caesar was staying, and she does assessments of emotional and memory care, mental health kinds of things. And I just called her up and said, I need to talk to you. I'm really stressed out and I don't, I need some help. And she listened to my story, and then she finally said, you don't need any kind of therapy or anything. What you need is somebody to really help you take some of this off your shoulders, because it's hard. And it's hard not being a medically trained person at all, coordinating these things and talking to doctors and or their offices and getting their attention and all that. So she recommended a care manager, and this woman named Heather Dawn, just an incredibly wonderful, wonderful woman. It was a godsend that I found her. So she helped with setting up all these appointments. She went with us most of the time. Sometimes she went with Caesar without me if I was busy. And she was just incredibly helpful. In this facility, there wasn't enough staff help that at any time when you really the spirit moved you and you wanted to go for a walk or you wanted to go in the gym or something, wasn't necessarily somebody around to kind of assist you. Although my husband could walk, he was using a walker and that, but still. So Heather helped us find a care provider, and this was just wonderful. He was great. He came about 3 days a week and spent time with him and helped him do whatever he wanted to do, and took him, out for a walk and such. And that was really, really wonderful. Um, but as things got worse, and his health really did progress in a negative way, we still were, having difficulties making sure that the doctors were talking to each other and all. And so we found a concierge primary care physician who was phenomenal. And she personally talked to the doctors because they would answer her calls and coordinated and said, the cardiologist wants to do this. And the pulmonologist said, no, we can't do it that way. We need to do a different medication and whatever. And she really handled all of that. Caesar, he was probably during this, 3-year period, he was in the hospital 4 or 5 times. Most of the times then he actually had to go into rehab afterwards. So this physician really helped us manage all of that and um, was with Caesar in the hospital in his last hospitalization and was again brought in, got some of the other doctors to come in and talk with us together. And ultimately, we wound up going back to the assisted living facility with hospice care, um, and absolutely incredible support. And my husband died last June. So I just passed my first year anniversary. It's been a hard year, of course. But I couldn't help but think about this as we're going through all of this. There were so many people that didn't have the resources that I had. And it's just it was hard for me to do. It was hard for both of us to get through all of this. And yet, it's so much harder for a lot of other people. And thus, that's why I'm here. We were really fortunate because we had all of this great care. We made mistakes, we had a few successes, and have learned an awful lot. And so that's why I'm here to help any caregivers that are facing this or approaching the time to do so, that maybe we could give them a little more support. I could give you some support on this very difficult journey I know you may be on. So let me talk about some of the things I learned. Um, First of all, just kind of an overall, there are so many different care options. You could start off with something as basic as a senior friendship center, which Sarasota has, and you pay a fee to get in there. And gosh, the services that they provide. We didn't do this. I wasn't familiar with it, but the services that they provide, and just from classes, activities, healthcare, psychological, memory issues, just wonderful, wonderful things that they can do. And I would say, I already mentioned respite care. That's a, one-off kind of if you just need a break or need a week or something like that. There's also daycare. And again, after the fact, I learned a bit about that. That really wasn't something that we totally would have used on a regular basis, but could have some. And there's, for example, a place called Times Square University Parkway that I have visited and is a really phenomenal daycare facility. And there's, that kind of help in a lot of different places and socialization if somebody just needs, some companionship. Great place to look. Independent living is often used as a stepping stone. So those are just, really separate apartments or townhouses or whatever that are usually or that can be connected to assisted living, memory care, maybe even nursing. And you settle in there, you make friends, you have the ability to take meals, as many or few as you want, and meet people, participate in their activities. And if and when you ever need more help, then you can transition into assisted living. So that's a great asset as well. And so I talked a little bit about assisted living, and I'll go into a little bit of detail about what they do provide, but I want to talk about licensing. And the final step is full up nursing homes, and that's where what all the old ugly stories came out about. Oh, nobody wants to go to a nursing home. Well, not very many people wind up in the nursing homes, fortunately, and they are some of them fantastic now, but they're very expensive. So let me just talk a little bit about licensing. Again, something I knew nothing about until we got into the third place. Um, so the assisted living facilities can have one of three licenses: a standard license, an extended congregate care license called an ECC, they call it an ECC, or a limited nursing services, LNS. I use these terminologies. So a standard license just covers routine personal care. You get housing, you have an apartment or something, you have meals, housekeeping, they do your laundry once a week usually, some transportation, and perhaps can help you with some medical conditions, help you with uh, receiving your medications, timing it and making sure you get them when you're supposed to, those kinds of things. An ECC license includes all of that, of course, but even more comprehensive services like bathing and grooming and toileting and nursing care, some nursing care. And their philosophies usually are they want to be able to give you enough help, again, short of a real nursing facility, so that you could age in place and finish your life in a very comfortable, supported place. The limited nursing services, they are even, able to provide more. They can do nursing medical assessments. They can do wound care, catheter care, all of those kinds of things, but not, again, anything that requires 24/7 skilled nursing. And that is the fourth category, and that is a real nursing facility. So when you're looking for a nursing facility, I think some of the things you might think about is whether or not it's a for-profit or a not-for-profit. There are some not-for-profit ones in Sarasota, and some people believe, and again, we were in a not-for-profit rehab facility a couple of times and found them incredibly personal and caring. And they did have assisted living there and memory care there. And we got on a wait list and never got in. So that's something to think about. I'm not saying that the not-for-profits are better, but now, because of how fortunate we all are in aging longer, um, that's a big business now, assisted living facilities and memory care facilities. It's a real big business. And some of these facilities that were created or are just being created get bought up by a national company. So that's something to think about also, is when you're going to have some concerns or make some strong requests about something, is the facility, the local facility, able to answer those questions and make those decisions, or do they go to some central, office somewhere else where they're very remote and you may not be able to talk to them? The third facility that we were in actually had a headquarters in Tampa, so we did have with some concerns we had some conversations with them that we were allowed to, reach out to them. I don't know how easy that would have been if that was, some long distance away. Obviously, you want to know what the basic costs cover. And there's what you find is most of them will start with that basic apartment, food, housekeeping, those kinds of things. But then they will have a tiered level of additional services that they could provide that have an additional price tag. So you need to know when you're going in, if you think they're going to have to distribute medications because this person isn't going to be able to handle that, or that might be in the next tier level and it might cost more. And you just have to ask them to lay all that out to show you they do have it. They generally will kind of, just from my conversations, will kind of summarize it and like, I'd like to see the details of that and the price tag that goes along with it. I think it's helpful. It's also really helpful to ask them, what is your historic cost? What were your cost increases historically? And what were, like the last 3 or 4 years? Some of them might be pretty much cost of living, sort of 2 to 3%-ish, or looking at Social Security cost of living increases. And some of them might, have bigger jumps because they have different things going on. They're raising funds to expand services or to expand actually the physical facility, things like that. One of them that we saw went from 2%, 3%, 7% back to 3%. So these are things you need to know as you're just deciding what you can afford, because almost every one of them, I'm pretty sure, is going to, on an annual basis, do a reassessment of that and perhaps raise their cost. You probably want to know about staff composition. So who is in your staff? Obviously there will be some nurses. Are they RNs? Are they LPNs? but how many do you have and what kind of schedules do they work? Because sometimes, something occurs and you really do need the assistance of a real nurse. How many CNAs do you have? Those are the certified nursing assistants. That was the caregiver that we had contracted with privately as well, but they have CNAs there. And how many of those do you have? And what are their schedules? Do they work double shifts, or do they work, is there somebody on staff all the way through midnight or through 10 o'clock or whatever that is? Just so you have a sense of um, what the composition is. And then you want to know if this is something we learned by mistake. My husband he was getting up out of his recliner and he fell on the floor in the evening, 10 o'clock at night or so, whacked his head, big black and blue eye, as it turned out, and cut his head a little bit. It wasn't severe. Well, this was the first time we discovered that they did not have anyone on staff. And again, this is the higher license place, not the highest, but they didn't have anybody on staff that was trained and authorized to distribute any even over-the-counter medications. So if you don't have any medications in your room, which some places do not allow you to do that, but anyhow, they can't give you an aspirin or a Tylenol. And they also can't do first aid if they're not trained in such. So you really want to know if your situation is such that there's a possibility that you're going to have a medical condition that would need somebody to do those kinds of things. You want to know that they're going to be there. So what they did do in this case is they call 911 and take you to the hospital. So of course I had to go to the hospital, and at the hospital they said, oh geez, they tested him. Of course they do the EKGs and all kinds of stuff, and they're like, but we don't have to, we don't have to do anything else. We're not going to admit him, and we're going to send him home. So I had to make arrangements for transportation home. And I was so surprised. I had no idea that was, and they did say that 3 days a week, they did have somebody there on the late shift, and the rest of the time they didn't. So something to know. You might want to ask about the staff turnover rate. There's a lot of minimum wage kind of workers that work in these facilities that help in the cafeteria. Even some of the CNAs that are just brand new are pretty low paid. And whenever you see that kind of wage situation, you're going to see a lot of turnover. Somebody, they go find a better job somewhere else, or they get mad at somebody and they leave. Not to say that I have never seen any standards of, well, this is a really good low turnover rate and this is a really high bad one. But if you're going and looking at 3 or 4 facilities, you can then do some comparisons and know what their staffing looks like, what their turnover looks like, and how many nurses they have, what kind of positions. So all of that will help you do an assessment of how great a care is this person really going to get. Additionally, most of these places have a residence council, which is really nice. The director of the program, of the facility, will meet with them every so often, however, maybe once a month or whatever, and they get to bring their concerns and questions and requests and all in. You can ask, do you have a residence council? And if you do, can I meet with the residence leader? I'd like to talk to him or her. Just a little detailed question about medical transportation. They all say they provide medical transportation, and they do. Some of them only do, probably most of them, only a few days a week, maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday, whatever, which is okay, as long as, you can schedule your appointments when they're there, when they're doing it. But some of them also I've found have a distance limitation. So if your doctor is perhaps more than 10 miles away, then they'll say that we can't take you. And then you just have to be cognizant of if the caregiver can't do all the driving around, what other services are there. And the county busing system, Breeze, they have Breeze on Demand, which I found, which is really inexpensive. But, so you if you have a doctor's appointment at 9 o'clock that's, 20 minutes away, they might come and pick you up 45 minutes or an hour before, depending on what their schedule is, and then they'll come and get you too. So that's something other than Uber and Lyft and, private transportation that you could use. just a couple of rough numbers in terms of cost, th- if you will. The adult daycare, the average around Sarasota is about $100 a day. And again, some of those programs are you can come once a week, 3 times a week, 5 days a week, whatever, come half days. So that varies, obviously. Assisted living averages last year was $4,900 a month. And again, that was for the very basics. And then if you add on, that's going to go up. Nursing, whoa, nursing is $9,000, $10,000 a month. I mean, it's so much more expensive. But again, they have round the clock nurses, and their staffing composition looks much different than an assisted living facility. And the memory cares are a bit more expensive than assisted, but depending on how much you need. So they could start at 5,000 and go up to 8 or so, depending on, how serious the situation is. Some of the facilities, most of them require some kind of an entrance fee. Know that that is, I believe, from my experience, that is somewhat negotiable. And some of them have like sales in the summer because I guess so many people run away from the heat that they don't have as many people coming in and replacing people who left. So you could maybe get a bargain if you're checking in the summertime. Um, and finally, there are some services that will help you assess facilities. There's one that I know of called Senior Living Selections, and she doesn't charge you anything, but is very familiar with a whole bunch of the facilities, and knowing what your situation is, can make some recommendations and say, these are the top three I think you should look at, and would probably go with you, would certainly talk to you about all of the details of that. And there are some other ones that you see on TV sometimes. Just beware of any that you're using, and ask the question, do you pass on my contact information to anybody else? Because if they do, you could be getting a lot of phone calls. And that happened to me actually when I was coming from North Carolina on my way down to, before we went down to Sarasota. Um, it, I got so many phone calls, and I got some of them from the same company. I was like, please put in your record that I already found something. I really don't need your help. And they call all the time. So that was kind of not wonderful. And then the only other piece of advice I would say is, if you're in early stages, do everything you can to plan ahead so that if and when the end of life occurs, you have done everything that you should have done way in advance, like, having a living will, or healthcare directive. That's so the person can say, this is what I want and what I don't want. And it usually assigning someone, like if I'm incapacitated and can't talk, this is my caregivers who can speak for me. That's the same thing with a durable power of attorney. They can make financial commitments for you. Obviously, an updated will would be a good thing to do. Um, a, this is a little one, but a DNR is a do not resuscitate. And if the person has, a will to, their personal will to, not be resuscitated, I don't want CPR performed on me. Uh, they have to be uh, they have to be in such a good mental state when they sign a document to do that, when they say so, or they just want to let them do it. So if you wait too late and you know that this person wanted to have a DNR and you want them to have a DNR, it can take many, many months to get it to happen if that person is through a memory care facility determined that maybe not competent enough to do that. So sort of important. And of course, all the final arrangements for burial or cremation or whatever. When Caesar died, the hospice nurses were there, said, I have the information you gave me. We will take care of this. They called the facility. They took care of absolutely everything, including, making sure that the death certificates got sent to me and all of that. That was wonderful, because that is not a time when you want to go to one of those facilities and sit and let them tell you what you needed to do and pick out things and make those arrangements. It's just very painful. Well, ending on a bad note, no. So that's really pretty much what I had to offer, and I would be very delighted to answer any questions or clarify anything.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sandra. And just to reiterate, everyone, please use that Q&A box for any questions. Sandra, I think we've got one here. Would you be able to provide a list of facilities that provide respite? And can you share the assisted living facilities that are not for profit? So if you have any of those, maybe you could share those with me and I can share them on the email that I'm gonna send with the recording tomorrow or Monday.
I definitely can do that, and I will. The only thing, there's a caveat on the respite. If they're full, they might rent that out more permanently, if you will. That
Mm,
happened in one facility that I knew of. So, but most of them, I think, do have it set up, but I can answer both of those questions. And Brent, I'll get that back to you.
okay, beautiful, beautiful. Um, Any other questions from our attendees tonight? I think, one question I have, Sandra, is, well, people may be thinking of questions that they want to ask. You touched on the cost, and the cost is a huge barrier for so many people. Do you know, are there resources out there or funding out there to help people with the cost or that you came across or you may be aware of?
I am not, but this, like the person, I know that the person that I just mentioned, the senior living selections person, she has some of that information. I know that there is some available, but it's not a lot.
Right.
And Medicare, of course, doesn't pay for any of that. Uh, and if if you're eligible for Medicaid, um, then probably yes. But you will
Mhm.
find that the facilities that take Medicaid people are not as
Not the best.
robust
Yeah.
as some of the other ones. It just kind of what you would expect. You know,
Right.
it's a shame. It really is, and that's why I think looking at some of these other alternatives, if at all possible, like adult daycare, like having somebody come in and you could get a caregiver to come in periodically and help out and give you a break if but I feel really badly for the people who don't even live in the same town as their parent or whatever, and they're struggling with trying to make all this happen, and they're not even there. I don't know
Right.
how they do it. I really don't.
Yeah.
I will
That's
just say this too. I'm happy to take, email questions and would be glad to call somebody back and, have a conversation if there's something more I can do for you. I can, gladly do that.
Thank you for that, Sandra. And just so everyone knows, when we send out the email with the recording, and those additional resources, we'll include Sandra's email. So if you do have questions that maybe you don't feel comfortable asking today or that come to you at a later time, you can email her, and she can get back to you on that. So, we appreciate that offer from you. Wonderful. Any other questions from our attendees tonight? Give it a minute here and see if anything else comes up. And then I just wanted to remind everyone before we end, there will be that brief survey that'll pop up on your screen. We'd greatly appreciate you to fill that out for us. Um, Sandra, it doesn't look like we have any other questions besides that one. So
Okay.
hopefully we get some people that want to email you some questions. I'm sure as people process and start to think about this and digest this information and questions will start to pop into their mind. So I do want to thank you, Sandra, for your time, your expertise. This is such, so many people are dealing with this. And
Yep.
it's difficult, and the lessons that you've learned and being able to share that with everyone is really invaluable. And I want to thank all of our attendees for joining tonight. As I mentioned, we'll send out a recording of this so you'll have it with Sandra's email and some additional resources. And don't forget to take that survey. We greatly appreciate it, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their evening. Bye,
Great.
everyone.
Thanks, Brent.
Take care.